Signal coming in from Talbot, sir, the junior officer up the deck reported. Morris rose and walked to the starboard bridge wing with his binoculars. He prided himself on being able to read Morse almost as quickly as his signalman. Report Iceland attacked and neutralized by Soviet forces. X. Expect more serious air and sub-threat. X. More good news, Skipper, the OOD commented. Yeah. USS Nimitz. How did they do it? Ship wondered aloud. How don't matter a damn, Toland replied. We gotta get this to the boss. He made a quick phone call and left for flag country. He almost got lost. Nimitz had over 2,000 compartments. The Admiral lived in only one of them, and Toland had only been there once. He found a Marine sentry at the door. The carrier's commander, Captain Svensson, was already there. Sir, we have a flash message that the Soviets have attacked and neutralized Iceland. They may have troops there. Do they have aircraft there? Svensson asked at once. We don't know. They're trying to get a recon bird to take a look, probably the Brits, but we won't have any hard information for at least 6 hours. The last friendly satellite pass was 2 hours ago, and we won't have another one of those for 9 hours. Okay, tell me what you have, the Admiral ordered. Toland went over the sketchy data that had come in the dispatch from Norfolk. From what we know, it was a pretty off-the-wall plan, but it seems to have worked. Nobody ever said Ivan was dumb, Svensson commented sourly. What about our orders? Nothing yet. How many troops on Iceland? The Admiral asked. No word on that, sir. The P-3 crew watched 2 relays of 4 hovercraft. At 100 men per load, that's 800 men, at least a battalion. Probably more like a regiment. The ship is large enough to carry the equipment load for a full brigade and then some. It's in one of Gorshkov's books that this sort of ship is uniquely useful for landing operations. Well, that's too much for a Mao to take on, sir, Svensson said. A Marine amphibious unit consisted of a reinforced battalion of troops. With 3 carriers backing them up? Admiral Baker snorted, then adopted a more thoughtful pose. You could be right at that. What does this do to the air threat to us? Iceland had a squadron of F-15s and a couple AWACS birds. That's a lot of protection for us. Gone. We've lost raid warning, attrition, and raid tracking capabilities. Svensson didn't like this at all. We should be able to handle their backfires ourselves, but it would have been a lot easier with those Eagles running interference. Baker sipped at his coffee. Our orders haven't changed. What else is going on in the world? Svensson asked. Norway is being hit hard, but no details yet. Same story in Germany. The Air Force is supposed to have gotten a heavy hit in on the Soviets. Again, no details. It's still too early for any substantive intel assessments of what's happening. If Ivan was able to suppress the Norwegians and fully neutralize Iceland, the air threat against this battle group has at least doubled, Svensson said. I have to get talking with my air group. The captain left. Admiral Baker was silent for several minutes. Toland had to stay put. He hadn't been dismissed yet. They just hit Keflavik? Yes, sir. Find out what else is there and get back to me. Yes, sir. As Toland walked back to the intelligence shack, he pondered what he'd told his wife. The carrier is the best protected ship in the fleet. But the captain was worried. Problems had developed in offloading the division's missile battalion. The barges that contained that equipment had been damaged by the missile strike. The newly installed landing doors had jammed solid and had to be torched free. He shrugged. Up to now, Polar Glory had been a near textbook operation. Not bad for a scratch crew. Most of his rolling equipment, 200 armored vehicles and many trucks, had already been mated to their crews and referred. The SA-11 battalion. Bad news, Comrade General. Fast command. The general asked testily. It had been a very long day. We have 3 usable rockets. 3? Both these barges were ruptured when the American missile hit us. The shock damage accounted for several. The main damage came from the water used to fight the fire. Those are mobile missiles, the general objected. Surely the designers anticipated that they might get wet? Not with saltwater, comrade. This is the Army version, not the naval, and it is not protected against saltwater corrosion. The men who fought the fire did so with great gusto, and most of the rockets were soaked. The exposed control wiring and the radar seeker heads on the missile noses were badly damaged. My men have run electronic tests of all the rockets. 3 are fully functional. 4 more we can probably clean off and repair. The rest are ruined. We have to fly more in. The general controlled his temper. So, a small thing that no one had thought of. Aboard ship, fires are fought with salt water. I should have asked for the naval variant of this rocket. It was always the small thing. Divide your launchers as planned. Place all the usable missiles at the Reykjavik airport and the ones you think you can fix at Keflavik. I'll order the replacement rockets to be flown in. Is there other damage? Apparently not. The radar antennae were covered with plastic, and the instruments inside the vehicles were safe because the vehicles themselves were sealed. If we get new rockets, my battalion is fully ready. We'll be ready to travel in 20 minutes. Sorry, comrade. Fault. You know where you are to go? 2 of my battery commanders have already checked the routes. Excellent. Carry on, Comrade Colonel. The general climbed back up the ladder to the bridge to look for his communications officer. Within 2 hours, a plane loaded with 40 SA-11 surface-to-air missiles was rolling off Murmansk's Kilpjabber airfield, bound for Iceland.
Altitude Altitude.
USS Nimitz. Toland had been a busy fellow for the past 12 hours. The data on Iceland came in slowly, one confusing piece at a time. And even now he didn't have enough to call a clear picture. The group's orders had been changed, though only after too many hours of indecision. The mission to reinforce Iceland was a washout. For the past 10 hours, the battle group had been heading due east toward friendly air cover from England and France. Someone had decided that if the Marines could not go to Iceland, then they might find useful employment in Germany. Bob had expected them to be diverted to Norway, where a Marine amphibious brigade was already in place. But getting them there could prove difficult. A furious air battle had been raging over northern Norway for almost 20 hours, with losses heavy on both sides. The Norwegians had started the war with scarcely 100 modern fighters. They were screaming for help, but there was no help for anyone as yet. They're not just chewing the Norwegians up, Toland observed. They're driving them south. Most of the attacks are on the northern bases, and they're not giving them any breather at all. Chip nodded. That figures. Gives their backfires a straighter shot at us. Briefing time. Yeah. Toland packed up his notes and walked again toward flag country. It was easier this time. Okay, Commander, Admiral Baker said. Start with the peripheries. Nothing much seems to be happening in the Pacific as yet. The Soviets are evidently putting a lot of diplomatic pressure on Japan. Same story they've given the rest of the world. It's all a German plot. Horseshit, Baker observed. True enough, Admiral, but it's a plausible enough story that Greece is refusing to honor its treaty commitments, and a lot of neutral and third world countries are buying it. Anyway, the Russians are making noises about giving the Sakhalin Islands back if they play ball, or pounding hell out of them if they don't. Bottom line, Japan is not allowing any bases on its soil to be used for offensive strikes against the Soviet Union. What we have in Korea is needed there. The only carrier group we have in the Western Pacific is centered on Midway. They're well out to sea at present, and they don't have the moxie to go after Kamchatka alone. There's some air activity in the South China Sea west of the Philippines, but nothing major yet. Cameron Bay appears to be empty of Soviet shipping. So the Pacific is quiet, but that won't last long. In the Indian Ocean, somebody launched a missile attack against Diego Garcia, probably a submarine. Not much damage. Just about everything there was sent out to sea 5 days ago. But it got their attention. At last report, their IO squadron was at 15 north, 90 east, a long way from our guys and heading south. No activity at all on NATO's southern flank. The Turks aren't about to attack Russia on their own hook, and Greece is staying out of what they call this German-Russian dispute. So Ivan has a secure southern flank too. And so far it looks like he's happy enough to keep it that way. So far the Russians are only fighting in Western Europe and against selected American installations elsewhere. They are telling anyone who will listen that they don't even want to fight us. They've even guaranteed the safety of American tourists and businessmen in the Soviet Union. Supposedly they're flying them all out through India. We've underestimated the political dimension here, sir. So far it's working for them. Okay, in Europe their operations began with from 20 to 30 Spetsnaz commando attacks throughout Germany. For the most part, they were defeated, but they scored big in 2 places. port of Hamburg has been blocked. A pair of merchantmen was scuttled in the main channel, and the team that pulled it off got away clean. Same thing was attempted in Bremen. They blocked one channel partially and burned 3 ships at one of the container terminals. This team didn't get away. The other attacks were against nuclear weapons storage sites, communications posts, and one big one against the tank site. Our guys were ready for it. We took losses, but those Spetsnaz troops got chewed up in most cases. The Soviet army attacked west just before dawn yesterday. The good news here is that the Air Force pulled something really wild. That new stealth fighter we've been hearing rumblings about is in squadron service, and it was used to raise a lot of hell behind Russian lines. The Air Force says they've got air superiority, or something close to it, so Ivan must have taken a big hit. Whatever they did, the initial Russian attack was not as powerful as expected. They're moving forward, but as of midnight, nothing more than 15 kilometers, and in 2 places they got stopped cold. So far, no word on nukes or chemical weapons. Losses are reported heavy on both sides, especially up in northern Germany, where they moved the farthest. Hamburg is threatened. The Kiel Canal may have been hit with an airborne or airmobile attack, we're not sure, but part is under Russian control. That situation is a little confused. A lot of activity on the Baltic, too. The fast attack boats of the German and Danish navies claim to have beaten up hard on a combined Soviet and East German attack, but again, things are pretty confused. Toland went on to describe the situation in Norway. The direct threats against us are from submarines and aircraft. Ivan subs have been pretty busy. We have reports of 22 merchant ships sunk. The worst was Ocean Star, a Panamanian flag passenger liner coming back from a med cruise. 800 miles northwest of Gibraltar, she took a missile hit, type unknown, but probably from a Juliet. She burned, lots of casualties. 2 Spanish frigates are moving in for the search and rescue. We have 3 submarines reported close to our course track, an Echo, a Tango, and a Foxtrot. There could be more, but intelligence reports have most of them south and west of us. When Iceland got neutralized, we lost the GI-UK SOSUS line, and that will allow Ivan's subs an easier access to the North Atlantic. SAC-LANT is dispatching subs to block the gaps. They'll have to hustle. We have reports of numerous Soviet submarines heading for the Denmark Strait. How many subs have we taken out? Svensson asked. Blagis and Brunswick claim 4 killed. The P-3s got off to a good start. The bad news here is that 1 Orion is missing and another reported being shot at by a sub-launched missile. This is being evaluated now, and we expect something firm by noon. In any case, the main threat to us now appears to be from aircraft, not subs. That could change by tomorrow, though. 1 day at a time. Get to Iceland, Baker ordered. The reports we had yesterday were correct. Evidently, a regimental-sized unit came in by sea, and the rest of its division was airlifted in, starting around 1400 hours. We have to assume they're all in by now. Fighters? Svensson asked. None reported, but it's possible. Iceland has 4 usable airfields. Wrong, Toland. It's 3, Baker said harshly. Beg pardon, sir, 4. The big base is Keflavik. 5 runways, 2 of them over 10,000 feet long. We built the place to stage B-52s out of, and it's quite a facility. Ivan got it virtually intact. His attack was planned deliberately not to crater the runways. Second, they have the civilian airfield at Reykjavik. The longest runway there is about 2,000 meters, plenty big enough for fighters, and it's got a city wrapped around it. Hitting that place means running the risk of civilian casualties. On the north side of the island is Akureyri, 1 hard surface strip. The 4th one, Admiral, is Old Keflavik, about 2 miles southeast of the current NATO airbase. It shows on the maps as unusable, but I ran into a guy who put in 2 years on Iceland. That strip is usable, certainly for rough surface-capable aircraft like our C-130. The base personnel use it for racing their go-karts and sports cars. He thinks you could use fighters out of there, too. Finally, every city on that island has a gravel strip for their domestic airline. The MiG-23 and several other Russian fighters have a rough field capability and could use any one of those. You're full of good news, observed Nimitz's commander, air group, known as the CAG. What about the other base facilities, like fuel? The fuel depot right on the base was destroyed in the attack, but the base tank farm was not, and neither was the new terminal at Hakatstenger. Unless somebody takes it out, we've left the Russians enough jet fuel to operate for months. How solid is all this? Baker wanted to know. We have an eyeball report from a Navy P-3 crew who surveyed the damage immediately after the attack. The RAF sent 2 Recce birds for a look-see. The first one got good shots of Keflavik and the surrounding area. The second didn't make it back. Reason unknown. Sams. The CAG really looked unhappy now. Toland nodded. A good bet. The photos show vehicles consistent with the presence of a reinforced Soviet air rifle division. Icelandic radio and TV are off the air. The Brits report contact with ham radio operators on the Icelandic coast, but nothing at all is coming out of the southwest corner of the island. That's where most of the people are, and it looks to be completely under Soviet control. We're getting some intel information, but it can't last. What you're telling us is that we can't expect raid warning from the Norwegians, and we've lost our picket fence at Iceland. What other assets do we have? Svensson asked. Evidently something. I've been told to expect possible raid warning from an asset codenamed Real Time. If a large force of Soviet aircraft leaves Kola, we ought to know about it. What's Real Time? The CAG asked. They didn't tell me that. Submarine. Baker smiled thinly. Jesus protect him when he transmits. Well, Ivan sent his bombers against Iceland yesterday. Anybody wonder where they'll be coming today? In case anyone wants it, my official intelligence estimate is right here, Toland said. Always nice to have a professional opinion, the CAG observed acidly. We ought to head north and pound on those Russians. By training and experience, the CAG was an attack pilot. But we can't do that until we deal with the backfires. What is the strength of the threat to us? I'm assuming no assistance from the Air Force units. With Soviet naval aviation alone, we have 6 regiments of strike aircraft, 3 each of backfires and Badgers, 1 regiment of Badger jammers, 1 regiment of Bear reconnaissance birds. Add some tanker assets to that. 27 aircraft to the regiment. That's about 160 strike aircraft, each of which can carry 2 or 3 air-to-surface missiles. Those Badgers will have to stretch to get here. The round trip must be a good 4,000 miles, even if they cut across Norway. Those are tired old birds, CAG said. What about their satellites? Toland checked his watch. There will be a Roarsat pass over us in 52 minutes. They got us 12 hours ago, too. I hope the Air Force gets its act together with their ASAT pretty soon, Svensson said quietly. If Ivan can real-time that satellite intelligence, they don't need those damn bears. They can figure our course easily enough, and it's only a 4-hour cruise down here for them. Try a course change as it passes overhead? CAG wondered. Not much point in it, Baker replied. We've been heading east for 10 hours. They can't miss that, and we can only do 20 knots. We can give them a plus-minus of 80 miles. How long does it take to fly that? Toland noted that Svensson and the CAG didn't like that decision, but neither disputed the point. He'd been told that Baker wasn't a man to argue with, and wondered if that was a good trait in a combat commander. Keflavik, Iceland. The major commanding the Air Force detachment was enjoying himself, despite having been up for over 30 hours. Keflavik was a magnificent base, and the paratroopers had captured it nearly intact. Most importantly, the Americans had thoughtfully stored their maintenance equipment in protective shelters dispersed throughout the base, and all of it had survived. As he watched from the smashed control tower, a half-dozen sweeper trucks were brushing the last fragments from runway 9. In 30 minutes it would be safe to use. 8 fuel Bowsers sat filled and ready on the field, and by the end of the day the pipeline should be repaired. Then this would be a fully functional Soviet airbase. How long before our fighters arrive? 30 minutes, Comrade Major. Get the radar operating. The Soviets had packed most of the equipment for a forward airbase in one of the Pusix barges. A mobile long-range radar was now operating just west of the main runway intersection, plus a van from which ground controllers could direct radar intercepts of incoming targets. 3 truck vans of spare parts and air-to-air missiles were on the base, and 300 maintenance personnel had been flown in the previous day. A full battery of SA-11 missiles guarded the runways, plus 8 mobile anti-aircraft guns and a platoon of infantrymen armed with handheld SAMs for low-flying raiders. The only hang-up had been with the SAMs, and the replacements, flown in a few hours ago, had already been loaded on the launcher vehicle. Any NATO aircraft that came waltzing into Iceland was in for a rude surprise, as a Royal Air Force Jaguar had discovered the night before, shot out of the sky over Reykjavik before its pilot could react. Runway 9 is cleared for operation, the radio operator reported. Excellent. Now get them working on 18. I want every strip operational by this afternoon. Hill 152, Iceland. What's that? Edward saw it first for a change. The wide silver wings of a Badger bomber skirted in and out of the lower cloud layer. Then something else. It was smaller, and it disappeared back into the clouds. Was that a fighter? I didn't see anything, sir. Garcia had been looking in the wrong direction. The sound passed overhead, the distinctive whine of turbojets on a low throttle setting. Keflavik, Iceland. The first MiG-29 Fulcrum landed at Keflavik a minute later. It taxied behind a base jeep and stopped close to the tower. The major in command of the base was there to meet it. "Welcome to Keflavik." "Excellent. Find me a lavatory," the colonel replied. The major motioned him to his own jeep. The Americans had left 70 jeeps behind, plus over 300 private automobiles, and drove toward the tower. The American radios had been destroyed, but the plumbing was made of sterner stuff. "How many?" "6, the colonel answered. "A goddamned Norwegian F-16 jumped us off Hammerfest and got one before we knew he was there. Another aborted with engine trouble, and the third had to land at Akureyri. Do we have men there?" "Not yet. We have only one helicopter. More should be coming in today." They pulled to the door. "Inside, second door on the right." "Thank you, Comrade Major." The colonel was back in 3 minutes. The unglamorous side of flying fighter aircraft. Somehow we never warned our cadets about this. "Here, coffee. Previous occupants were most kind to us." The major unscrewed an American thermos. The colonel took the cup, savoring the flavor as though it were fine brandy, while he watched his fighters land. "We have your missiles all ready for you, and we can refuel every aircraft from our trucks. How soon can you fly again?" "I'd prefer that my men get at least 2 hours to rest and eat, and I want those aircraft dispersed after they're fueled." "Have you been hit yet?" "Only 2 reconnaissance aircraft, and we killed 1. If we're lucky, luck is for fools. The Americans will hit us today." "I would.